Hello, in this tutorial we are going to learn how to use the any operator from the cpplinq library. As target board I'm going to be using an ESP32 Farabittle board from the FRobot. So the any operator is a very interesting operator that allows us to get a boolean value indicating if at least one of the elements of an array fills a given criteria. So basically imagine that we have an array of values, we have a specific criteria, in our case checking if an element is lesser than 100. If at least one element is lesser than 100, then this operator will return true, otherwise it will return false. It's very simple. It can be seen as a combination of a where operator plus a count, where we check if there's at least one element in the resulting range. But in terms of syntax, this any is much more expressive because we see this operator and we know right away what we want to check. So, getting right into the code, the first thing we need to do is including the cpplinq library and declaring the using of the cpplinq namespace like we have been doing before, and then jumping right to the Arduino setup. We first start a serial connection so we can output the results of our program. Then we are going to apply this operator to two different arrays. One of them will have at least one element that fills the criteria and the any operator should return true, and in the other none of the elements will fill the criteria, so we expect this operator to return false. So we start by defining an array that has some elements that are lesser than 100. Take in consideration that we want lesser, not lesser or equal, so 100 no longer counts. But basically we have here at least three elements that fill our criteria. So after we define our array, we are going to start applying the cpplinq operator, but first, as usual, we need to convert it to a range object with the from array function, and then we simply need to call the any operator. The any operator, in terms of implementation, receives as input a function, pretty much like we have seen in the where operator, and in this case basically this function should implement the condition that we want to check. So basically this function here will be applied for all elements of our range, and if for at least one of the elements it returns true, it means that at least one element fills our criteria, and then the any will return true. If this function is applied by all the elements of our range and for each element it returns false, then the any operator will return false. So pretty much it implements the condition that we want to check against our array, and that at least one of the elements we want to check if at least one of the elements fills. In our case, like we have also seen before, we are using the C++ Lambda syntax. Basically we defined an anonymous function. Here it corresponds to the captures, we won't use it. The parameter of this function is an integer. Recall that this is going to be applied by each element of the array, and each element is an integer. And the body basically corresponds to checking if the element is lesser than 100. If so, it returns true, otherwise it returns false. And that's it. As output, the whole expression tree will return a boolean, because this any operator, as mentioned, returns a boolean value indicating if at least one element fills the criteria or not. Now we are going to define a second array. In this case, there's no element that is lesser than 100. Again, recall that the condition is lesser, so this 100 doesn't count. And we are going to do the same, applying exactly the same expression tree, and restore the second result in another variable, again another boolean. And finally we are going to print both results here for array 1 and array 2. I've already uploaded the code as usual, and basically as we can see here, for the first array this operator returns 1, because basically in the first array there was at least one element that was lesser than 100, and then for the second array it returns 0 because no element is lesser than 100. So for each element of that array the lambda function returned always false, so globally the any operator returned false for the second array. This is it, very simple. Another useful C++ link operator that we can use in our code. Again, this can be chained with other operators. The possibilities are endless. So thank you very much for watching. Hope you have enjoyed.